China has deployed thousands of fishing boats recently, forming floating barriers that stretch about 200 miles long in the East China Sea. First, how are you reading this? What could China be practicing for here?
Well, they're practicing using their sort of fishing fleet as a barrier, an obstacle for anyone who might try to get in and help Taiwan. They're also sending a message to the Japanese, as they've done before, actually, in 2014, 2016, saying that anytime we want, we can flood your territory with our fishing boats. Say the Senkaku Islands, parts of the Ryukyus, the Ogawasara Islands south of Japan, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they're sending a message. But what they have done is demonstrated an even higher degree of ability to weaponize their fishing fleet, to command and control it, put it where they want it. And this does cause a lot of problems for the United States Navy. You might think a fishing boat versus a U.S. Navy destroyer isn't much of a match, but when there's a couple thousand fishing boats out there, it makes life more challenging. Plus, there's real usefulness for anti-submarine warfare. It makes it harder for our submarines to operate in the region when you've got a lot of Chinese fishing boats out, and particularly when the Chinese put certain sensors and other hardware on them.
I want to get to the U.S. part, but first, this scale this time seems kind of unprecedented. I know in the past there's been hundreds, but maybe not thousands like we saw here. What do you see in terms of the timing of this? Why now?
Well, it's just part of a larger intensification on the part of the of the Chinese, to use every resource they've got, from their Navy to their Coast Guard, to their maritime militia, the fishing fleet, put it all together, make it so that you can operate it in a coherent fashion and apply pressure. In this case, it's largely Taiwan that is the main target, but the Chinese are obviously looking farther afield. We've seen them operating similarly against the Philippines in recent years, and the Japanese, as I mentioned, are very much in the Chinese crosshairs. But the Chinese are indeed thinking very closely about how you prevent, say, an outside military, and they use the word external force, but they mean the Americans. How do you keep the Americans from getting in close to Taiwan? Having your fishing fleet weaponized like this is one aspect of the strategy that the Chinese will employ.
I want to dig into that potential gray zone warfare area that we're seeing there, because in terms of, say, a Taiwan contingency, if the U.S. is trying to come in, you were talking about how this is already going to embroil that. But there are some raising the concern that this would become a moral dilemma for the U.S., striking, say, civilian boats. How do you see that aspect playing out?
Well, it's as moral a dilemma as you want it to be. The Chinese are clearly not just skirting the edge of the law, they've gone well over it. And they are using this as a tool of their military, and that renders it a lawful target. And the Americans, however, and other Westerners, tend to tie themselves in knots when presented with this situation and say, oh, there's nothing we can do. And someday we need to wake up and say, we're not going to hold back. And that's always been one of the solutions to this, is to tell the Chinese, we look at this the same way we do the People's Liberation Army Navy, and we will defend ourselves.
Now, it wasn't just these fishing boats. We also saw China flew a drone directly into Taiwan's airspace for the first time recently. What is China signaling with that move?
Well, as I said, it's this intensification of move and pressure against Taiwan. And to see what the Taiwanese reaction is, see what the American reaction is to it all. Also, you're wearing down your opponent at the same time. And they're just getting so used to this, gradually turning up the heat, that you don't realize just how dangerous the situation is and how extreme the threat is. One thing would like to go back, and when you talk about the fishing fleet, there's also a maritime militia, which is worked in with the fishing fleet. And these are parts of the People's Liberation Army armed forces, and they are sort of double-hulled, have stronger, more powerful engines. They're armed, often have surveillance equipment on them, and they function as sort of the muscle of the fishing fleet. So that's mixed in there, and that makes it even more of a lawful target. But this is, once again, Chinese very comprehensive strategy that they've got to use every tool at their resources to overwhelm, just sort of overpower the opponents.